Farm Week is a production of the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
Today on Farm Week, there are forecasts for drier, hotter weather this year in the United States.
In Southern Gardening, we'll have a preview of the Gulf Coast Garden and Patio Show in Biloxi. It takes place at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum February 25th through the 27th.
In the markets, a reduced forecast for corn ending stocks sets the stage for higher prices, as larger supplies of broilers and competing meats are expected to reduce chicken prices.
In the feature segment today, it's a fruit and juice familiar to many of us, but few of us know how it's grown. We'll go to Massachusetts to find out about growing cranberries. Some of the plants here are more than 100 years old.
We're managing our properties 365 days a year. I haven't seen any corn plants that are approaching 80 years old, and here my cranberry plants are still being very productive after 80 years. And I'd like to see some of the plants that are around that will be doing some of this. So ours requires a fair amount of finesse and a good touch and working in concert with Mother Nature to be able to have a productive cranberry farm.
Good day, everyone. I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Artist Ford. Welcome to Farm Week.
A weather expert says that La Nina in the Pacific Ocean will bring drier, hotter weather this year to the U.S.
Leighton, speaking at the Cattle Industry Convention in Denver, a CattleFax weather expert outlined the weather trends for the coming year in the United States. He said the weather patterns in the South are similar to those of 50 to 60 years ago. Creighton University professor Art Douglas said La Nina, the one that developed last year in the Pacific Ocean, will continue into the spring and summer this year. Colder ocean surface temperatures occur during a La Nina episode. Now, Douglas said the extension of this year's cold and snow into the South is reminiscent of the weather patterns of the 1950s and 1960s. Looking at this year, Douglas says that La Nina will probably bring its usual dry conditions to most of the continental U.S. He says this spring could see hotter and drier conditions ranging from the southwest U.S. to the plains and into the western Corn Belt. This summer, Douglas looks for high temperatures in the Corn Belt with drier than usual conditions across the Midwest and the plains. Douglas looks for El Nino conditions in the Pacific to return by the spring of next year. That usually signals wetter weather. Douglas says sunspot activity, though, seems to be entering an unexpected long-term period of inactivity. This usually means cooler global temperatures. Well, in this week's Southern Gardening segment, Extension Horticulturist Dr. Gary Bachman says the Gulf Coast Garden and Patio Show in Biloxi, Mississippi is the place to be for the latest plants and good gardening advice.
Look at this fantastic garden. Can you believe it's time again for the Gulf Coast Garden and Patio Show? Well, it is, and you'll want to be there when the doors open February 25th, 26th, and 27th at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum in Biloxi. The show is a true gardener's paradise. It's the place to find the hottest and newest trees, flowers, and shrubs for the landscape. There will be plenty of display gardens designed as outdoor living spaces to give you ideas for your home. Exhibitors will showcase equipment and gear that will make your chores a little easier. You'll also find beautiful fountains and water features, along with all kinds of ironwork and even greenhouses. It's almost unbelievable to see so many gardeners carry out garden accessories and flats of blooming plants. There are free seminars all 3 days. You can have your soil tested for free, and you can have your questions answered by experts with the Mississippi State University Extension Service. The show is designed with the whole family in mind. Children will love all the activities. Mississippi's Garden and Patio Shows began in 1998 as a partnership between Mississippi State University, the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, and the Mississippi Nursery and Landscape Association. So make plans to attend the Gulf Coast Garden and Patio Show February 25th, 26th, and 27th at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum in Biloxi. I'll be there, and I hope to see you there too. I'm Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Gary says to come out to the Gulf Coast Garden and Patio Show Biloxi for that great advice and to get a kickstart on your gardening year. Well, Leighton, in our feature segment today, cranberries. Mississippians are familiar with crops and fish grown in water, but see how cranberries are grown. Some of these farmers' plants are more than 100 years old. Time now for the markets with Leighton, and it's not a surprise, Leighton, but the USDA says that it will not issue partial counter-cyclical payments for many 2010 crops, including wheat, corn, soybeans, peanuts, and upland cotton. That is due to higher prices. Also, it announced that there would be no final CCC payments to be made on 2009 rice, and that also due to higher market prices. Looking though now at the markets, you say that the government's monthly supply demand numbers are our top story this week.
That's right, Aris. Those Wednesday reports show continued strong demand for corn, and broker Nolan Cullen will have some analysis for you here in a moment. Also ahead in this segment, Russia discloses when it may have enough grain in order to be able to export once again. A new forecast says some livestock prices may rise, as higher diesel fuel prices are expected to impact spring planting. We begin with that new crop production and supply and demand set of numbers. Using the internet, we made a video call to Nolan Cullen in Jackson, a broker for Walsh Trading. Our conversation took place Wednesday morning, a few hours after the government released the monthly reports. Nolan, what did the USDA numbers tell us this morning?
Leighton, USDA gave us numbers this morning that were somewhat mixed versus traders' expectations specifically. Soybeans came in at 140 million carryover. That's unchanged from their January report. In the case of wheat, they came in at 818, a carryover of 818, which was also unchanged. And in cotton, the carryout of 1.9 million bales was also unchanged from the January figure. Normally, this is not to be unexpected. The real surprise and the bullishness in the report came with the reduction of corn carryover. Carryover was projected to be, by analysts, 736 million bushel carryover. It came in at 675. That was a 9% reduction in the existing corn carryover of 745. From the numbers, we would say soybeans, wheat, and cotton are neutral. For the corn, it's very bullish. It's continuing to say strong demand for ethanol and exports in corn are drawing down stocks. We perceive this bullish, and in fact, the market has traded these numbers bullishly for corn for the most part. Up numbers in soybeans and wheat and cotton. All of these are setting new highs for these commodities. It suggests that the trend is up. I believe the final bottom line on the report is we will continue to shift and focus on new crop production. These numbers tell us we not only need increased acres with better than expected yields to alleviate the tightness across the agricultural board. And so I believe the market will be buying acres in favor of new crop versus old crop for at least the next 35 to 40 days until we see some preliminary planting estimates.
So at this point, you would say that this pretty much puts us in this new crop mode. Here we are almost to the middle of February, and this clarifies a lot of what producers have been wondering about.
That's correct, Leighton. I think, like I say, the bullishness in the market will focus on new crop. We need to buy some acres. We need to bring additional acres into production, and at the price levels we're seeing for soybeans, wheat, cotton, and corn, it will be a competition to see which of these price levels draws the most acres. Again, to repeat, we do need increased acreage versus current consensus right now to alleviate this problem for the 11 carryouts. Otherwise, this bullishness could extend all the way into 12.
Once again, that was broker Nolan Cullen of Jackson with Walsh Trading. As Nolan mentioned, USDA projected ending stocks of wheat remain unchanged from last month at 818 million bushels. Looking closer now at that market, analyst Elaine Cubb tells Market to Market recently she has been watching spring wheat prices and explains why.
I am more bullish for wheat and rice and these staple grains, but particularly spring wheat, than I am for most of the other grains, because we're not really in the battle for acres time frame yet. But if you look at the spring wheat prices compared to how corn has gained, they really still need to make some advances. You know, the corn soybeans question is pretty much settled as far as what's going to get planted. But if we need to create more spring wheat in Durham, which we do, these prices need to come up.
Russia says it is ready to resume grain exports that were halted last summer if the harvest there hits 85 million metric tons this year. The Deputy Agriculture Minister explains the 85 million figure this way. Grain carryover stocks are estimated at 10 million tons in Russia, while domestic consumption there will be 72 to 74 million tons. Bloomberg, by the way, reports Russian farmers have about 95% of the seed needed to plant this spring. Russia cut off grain exports last August in reaction to the summer drought. Before we talk about the livestock market, here's our trivia quiz for the week. How much does a bushel of wheat weigh? Well, the answer is one of these: 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, or 60 pounds. I'll tell you here in a few more minutes.
We're going to pause now for a short break on Farm Week. Coming up, we'll look at the calendar in the second half of the markets. Leighton Span reports cattle and hog prices are moving higher. In the feature segment today, cranberries. See how this specialty crop is grown and see how all forms of farming have their ups and downs.
Each year, many Mississippians are seriously injured or killed when farm tractors overturn. Don't become a statistic. Avoid rollovers by staying away from steep ditches and pond banks. Slow down and operate tractors at a safe angle to the slope of the terrain. Always keep loader buckets low when transporting materials and inspect the work area for obstacles such as stumps, holes, or washes. A message from the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
I've got a lot of choices to make in the coming years, and I really want to make sure that I get it all right. I want to discover who I am, where I belong, what my dreams are. I want to find my hidden talents and see where those skills can take me in the future. I need leadership given today to help me make the right decisions tomorrow. And I have that with Mississippi 4-H.
Before we get back to the markets, let's look at the Farm Week calendar. Mississippi State University is the site of the annual Mississippi Crop College. It's set for February 15th through the 17th on the MSU campus in Starkville. It is a great source of continuing education credits. We'll have a link on the Farm Week calendar to help you register. We'll also have a link so you can look at the agenda. The North Mississippi Research and Extension Center's Producer Advisory Council takes place Thursday, February 17th. It gets underway at 8:30 a.m. at the Lee County Agri Center at Verona. Producers will find out what research projects are underway at the center and give advice on the research that fits their problems. 21st Annual Greenhouse Tomato Growers Short Course is set for Wednesday and Thursday, March 9th and 10th. It will be held at the Eagle Ridge Conference Center in Raymond, Mississippi. Register by February 25th, and the cost is $125. It's $150 at the door. We'll have links to help you register. Go to our Farm Week website at farmweek.msucares.com for information on these and other events. Now check out this Farm Week snapshot.
Prepared? You bet. We wouldn't think of heading out on our adventure without the right gear and supplies. We have to be able to endure some heat and get through a few unexpected storms, but we work through those together. We may have some steep hills to climb, but we know we're ready. Of course we prepared for our marriage. Until death do us part.
This week's USDA Supply and Demand Estimates report also included livestock, and this report is forecasting higher cattle and hog prices. Other findings include an increase in beef slaughter in the mid-year time frame. Meanwhile, for the hog sector, pork production is reduced for the first quarter, while the export forecast for hogs is increased. And for chicken, broiler production is raised for the first quarter of 2011, but the broiler export forecast is unchanged from last month. Larger supplies of chicken and competing meats led the government to reduce the broiler price forecast up to about $0.05 a pound. Oil prices have the attention of everyone who drives a vehicle these days, but for farmers nearing planting season and worrying about input costs, the constant rise in diesel fuel prices for 8 weeks is not encouraging. Analyst Elaine Cubb says the situation in the Middle East with Egypt is obviously weighing on the oil market.
You know, the crude oil market has struggled to move over $92 this past week, and I feel like if there wasn't so much tension in the geopolitical sense, that the market probably wouldn't be moving much higher than that. There's demand factors that aren't growing, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. I think if it was just, all things being equal, it would stay in this range of consolidation between $92 and $88, let's say. But that being said, all bets are off. Some of this is probably priced in, but what happens next week? What happens the week after? There's no guarantees on this.
In neighboring Arkansas, 385 poultry workers will be losing their jobs this spring. Pettigene Poultry is closing its Arkadelphia, Arkansas deboning plant April 1st. Tyson Foods had announced it was not renewing a deboning contract with that plant before the closure announcement. Well, let's close out the markets with the answer to our trivia quiz for this week. The correct choice is D. 60 pounds is how much a bushel of wheat weighs.
Growers in the Mississippi Delta are familiar with levees and water because of our rice and catfish farms. In today's feature segment, however, we have a water-related crop that's unusual even for us. I'm talking about cranberries. Last year's crop was one of the biggest ever, and the pendulum of supply and demand is swinging against growers. Market to Market's Andrew Bott examines the realities of the marketplace for this specialty crop.
Few harvests can match the stark beauty and rich color of cranberries in the American Northeast. The state of Wisconsin may have perfected the mass production of this annual crop, but you can trace the berry's roots and history back to the bogs of Massachusetts. Stretching across 14,000 acres of annually flooded fields, Massachusetts farmers are second in the nation in cranberry production, and the red fruit accounts for nearly 1/5 of the state's entire farm production revenue. Some growers harvest the original cranberry vines planted by their ancestors more than a century ago, as the annual crop doesn't call for replanting in the region's sandy topsoil.
We're managing our properties 365 days a year. I haven't seen any corn plants that are approaching 80 years old, and here my cranberry plants are still being very productive after 80 years. And I'd like to see some of the plants that are around that will be doing some of this. So ours requires a fair amount of finesse and a good touch and working in concert with Mother Nature to be able to have a productive cranberry farm.
Fourth-generation cranberry grower Gary Gerritsen has toiled in his family's cranberry operation since the 1970s. As fall approaches, the massive acreages are flooded one by one. Field workers operating beating machines run multiple passes through each bog, literally shaking the cranberries off the vines and into the rising water. A team of hired hands corral the red fruit into concentrated circles, starkly visible from hundreds of feet above. Powerful pumps suck up the floating fruit. Pressured water strips away much of the remaining leaves and chaff, and the berries are dumped into nearby containers. Truckload after truckload of Gerritsen's crop will eventually arrive here, at one of Ocean Spray's massive collection facilities, which run non-stop from late September into November. The imagery of a bountiful harvest evokes a sense of prosperity for the cranberry industry, but a decade-long economic roller coaster has buffeted the pocketbooks of growers, and for many farmers, their parent cooperative, Ocean Spray.
Almost 10 years ago, exactly at this point, the industry was going through an oversupply. The price of cranberries in the industry, including Ocean Sprays, had crashed to about $12 per barrel. We literally announced that price the week I joined the company. There is no average farm of cranberries, but if there was, the average cost of growing cranberries back then was probably around $18 a barrel. So at $12 a barrel, everybody was losing money. So they were interesting times.
CEO Randy Papadelis came to Ocean Spray in 2003 amidst a swarm of grower resentment towards dwindling profits and a company teetering on the edge of a potentially aggressive takeover.
Half the growers in the co-op who believed that they could rebuild what they once had in terms of a strong, profitable business. And you had about the other half who felt that it had been a good run, but they had built up significant equity in this brand called Ocean Spray and felt that if they sold that brand to a large strategic buyer like a Pepsi, a Coke, or a Nestle, that they could realize more value that way.
Ultimately, growers narrowly chose to spurn the Pepsi bottling takeover and embrace a new long-term marketing strategy for the world's largest producer of cranberries. A host of increased marketing efforts launched for the popular dried cranberry snacks, craisins, cranberry energy drinks, and a fresh variety of blended offerings that have bolstered the bottom line. But unlike other food and beverage companies, Ocean Spray's shareholders are its 750 farms.
We, in a sense, try to maximize the cost of our largest raw materials. So I have a lot of colleagues in the consumer packaged goods world and when I try to explain to them that my job is to actually maximize the cost of my largest raw material purchase, which are cranberries and grapefruit, that's a little different for them.
As businesses across the country cope with the fallout from the Great Recession, the cranberry industry is now faced with its latest wave of oversupply. And according to Papadelis, a nearly all-time low commodity price for cranberries.
Because of the investments that we've put in and the strength of our business, we're actually in a 180 degrees opposite place in regards to the Ocean Spray brand. The Ocean Spray growers will receive the highest return in the history of the cooperative on the crop that we're harvesting right now, whereas the independent growers may in fact see the lowest return that they've ever seen. So it's created quite a dichotomy within our industry.
That gap between those inside and outside the cooperative has created tension throughout the industry.
When a cooperative controls 65 to 70% of A, the tonnage, and B, the market, then they do have a lot of control and decide a lot of things.
John Dekas, whose family first dabbled with cranberry production in the 1930s, now represents his namesake company. The collection of more than 150 growers and 500 acres of bogs have long carved a niche into the Ocean Spray-dominated industry. Dekas contends the latest glut of berries is due to poor planning and further amplified by juice blending practices.
The price went up. A lot of the major companies, and I'm not going to name them here now, but it isn't hard to figure it out, started putting less and less cranberry in their products. Problem with that is, you know, if there was a shortage and you need to do that, that's one thing. But there's no shortage now. There's an oversupply. Berries are very, very cheap. The growers are getting hammered as a result. And instead of passing that cut, that cost saving onto the consumer, they're putting it in their pockets.
Ocean Spray's Papadelis contends the blend of cranberry concentrate and other juices isn't linked to supply, but instead driven by consumers.
There's some who believe the industry is better off by putting more cranberries in the bottle. Well, everything we do is based on consumer research and consumer insights. And our goal is not necessarily to put the most amount of cranberry in the bottle, but it's to sell the most amount of bottles.
Like their heavyweight competitor, Dekas has aggressively marketed their sweetened dried cranberries, known in the industry as SDCs. The mid-sized operation also is bullish on its latest venture. The Dekas Fruitaceuticals are pumped full of previously leftover antioxidant-rich cranberry material.
If we've learned anything in this industry over the years, you can't stand still, because once you develop a particular product like sweet dried that's successful and growers start making money, they start building more and more bogs. They're very aggressive and they're very good at what they do. An ordinary response to that is, well, you got to grow your way out of it. Well, you grow your way out of it by generating new products and opening new markets.
Expanding markets is at least one thing the overall industry may agree on. Ocean Spray has sought a consumer foothold in countries ranging from Western Europe to East Asia. the efforts could bolster demand for the largely North American fruit. But regardless of the outcome, cooperative members like Gary Gerritsen contend Ocean Spray is more than an end user of commodities.
It's not just a contract. We have a relationship with our marketing co-op, and that's different from just a contractual obligation to take my fruit and go away and give me the highest price. I feel it completes us as a farm, and I can concentrate on my farming and not on my marketing.
Cranberry production in 2010 is shaping up to be the second largest on record. USDA claims 7.35 million 100-pound barrels will be collected. That's up 6% from a year ago, leaving marketers like Deacon's and Ocean Spray to find a home for all those berries. For Market to Market, I'm Andrew Bott.
If you're interested in watching this feature again, you can go to our Farmweek website, farmweek.msucares.com. We'll also have links to the Market to Market website where you can see the story as well and read the script. We'll also have links to Ocean Spray and Deacon's cranberries. That's farmweek.msucares.com. Well, we are at the end of Farm Week for this week. On our show next week, passing on the gift.
It's one of the methods that Heifer International uses to end hunger and poverty in underdeveloped countries. This Arkansas-based religious organization helps improve the life of third world residents through agriculture.
In Southern gardening, dreams of summer. Now is the time to get inspired and make plans for warm weather. For the rest of the Farm Week crew, I'm Artis Ford.
And I'm Leighton Spann. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.